2025 is upon us, and with it comes an insane amount of games. It's a huge year with tons of blockbusters as well as a lot of, and I do mean a lot of promising smaller games, and I wanted to share all the games I'm interested in one way or another. There are 99 games on my radar this year, most of which I will not have the money or time to play, but I want to highlight them anyways to put you onto some stuff that you haven't heard of before, or to help sell you on some stuff that you haven't been sold on yet. Just to get this out of the way now, I am keeping this list condensed to games that have been officially given a date or a release window in 2025 by either their developer or their publisher. Nothing based on vibes or rumors. So no Pragmata, no Wonder Woman, no Wolverine, no Silk Song, no MGS Delta, no Corridor Remake, no Light No Fire, no Blade Runner 2033, no Phantom Blade Zero, no Wolf Among Us 2 as much as that hurts me to say, no Kingdom Hearts 4, no Little Devil Inside, no Witcher 4. You probably get the gist by now. Now, is everything on this list guaranteed to come out this year? No, stuff is bound to get delayed. But while they still have 2025 release windows, why not talk about them? So let's do just that, shall we? A lot of Judas's hype stems from it being the next game from Ken Levine, who worked on System Shock 2 and also created BioShock. Judas has a lot of that BioShock energy, but it's also doing its own thing in more ways than one. The narrative setup is fascinating with a deep focus on existentialism, and the art direction is absolutely stunning, like legit stunning. Outside of the System Shock remake, it's been a while since we've gotten like a BioShock adjacent title, so I'm really excited to experience this when it comes out, which by all accounts should be in spring. I love Borderlands. I still tout 2 as the best looter shooter ever. Even though I had to play 3 on mute for reasons I'm sure you already know of, it was still a fun ass game, so of course I'm down for more. The trailer showed some new stuff, but not much. I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of how washed out the game looks, since games like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and Borderlands 2 are so vivid. The new Vault Hunters also don't stand out as much considering how similar they look, but I'm curious to see how they'll play. Hopefully a more in-depth trailer soon showing off the new things in full will get me on board with what they're cooking. It looks cool, I just want to see more. I loved the first Death Stranding. Such a unique game that made me feel such a special sense of community with the Strand system. Planning routes and overcoming obstacles while taking in the sights and sounds of an oddly Icelandic United States was so cathartic. There's nothing quite like Death Stranding, and I'm so glad we're getting more of it. The trailer from last year showed off some cool stuff like a 12 FPS puppet, these neck hands that smoke for you, and a fight scene between a samurai and a guy holding a literal electric guitar. But it also seems like they're adding more challenge to the world with how weather can affect your constructs. I can't wait to see the new locales and see how the delivery and combat systems have evolved. It's one of my most anticipated games this year, and oh my god, I cannot wait. The initial reveal trailer for Avowed gave the impression that it was going to be a very dark game. Not only in terms of visuals, but also tone. Fast forward some years later, and when it was fully revealed, the reception to it was a bit polarizing. I thought it looked neat, but a decent amount of people felt a bit misled, even though time and time again, CG trailers have proven that they rarely represent what the final game will look or be like. Recent previews for the game have been super positive, with the gameplay and writing being standouts. Obsidian to me has an amazing track record outside of one title, but I will talk about that soon. With games like New Vegas, Stick of Truth, Pentiment, and Grounded, I have full faith that Avowed will be yet another Obsidian banger. It's Monster Hunter. Like, what else do I really have to say? It looks insane, from the visuals to the new weather system to especially the new gameplay additions and changes. Focus mode lets you target specific monster parts. The armor not being gender locked anymore is a big small change. Being able to have backup weapons on your trusty steed is huge, like insanely huge for the series. And they finally have a fucking 3D map, thank God! With how vertical and intricate Monster Hunter maps are, this is a godsend. I put a decent amount of time into Monster Hunter World. I didn't put enough into Rise, so Wilds is the one where I hope to sink a bunch of time into. I'm insanely excited for this, and it comes out next month. I heard about Remedy doing a multiplayer project for a while, but I'll be honest, I never thought we'd actually see it considering how any financial news about Remedy is usually about Alan Wake 2 not making a profit, but we gotta look at it, and it looks pretty dope. The only thing I'm weary of is if it's going to treat itself like a live service, since anything that's multiplayer now seemingly has to be, which is a damn shame. There's not much word on that yet, but I hope to see more details about that soon. Outside of that though, I rarely turn down a co-op shooter, and this one looks so fun. Firebreak, taking place in the Control universe and more specifically in the FBC itself, has a ton of potential to do some crazy ass things with the set pieces, the weapons, the playstyles, and the overall gameplay. The trailer gave me some Deep Rock Galactic vibes with the varying toolkits and how the team must function and coordinate with one another. I'm glad Remedy is trying something fresh for them, and I hope it pays off so they can continue to try new things. Holy moly, the game that was never coming out is actually coming out. And guess what? It looks like more Metroid Prime. What more can we really ask for? There's very little details on Prime at the moment, as well as Nintendo's 2025 slate in general. Everyone and their mom and probably their barber knows that the Switch 2 is coming out pretty soon, but we're just waiting on confirmation at this point. As for Prime 4, I'm so glad that the series is back in full force again after so long. I wish I could say the same for F-Zero, but my day will come. Eventually. Probably after I'm dead. But it will happen. Trust me. But yeah, I'm super hyped for Prime 4. I can't wait for my brother to love it for the first week and then completely shit on it afterwards. And no, I will not elaborate. Fatal Fury City of the Wolves is my most anticipated game of 2025. If you don't know already, I'm a huge fighting game slut and Fatal Fury looks incredible. I played it a decent amount at EVO last year, and with every second I played, I grew more and more enamored at how much this game is going for. It's probably the most mechanically dense 1v1 fighter I have played in a hot minute, and I do not say that lightly. Yes, even more dense than Street Fighter 6. SNK are putting their all into making sure that City of the Wolves is a huge hit. The comic book visuals are striking as hell, it looks amazing. Season 1 is included with the base game, so 5 DLC characters are practically free. There's a big focus on single player content, not to mention they already have 2 major collaborations in the works. Ken and Chun-Li are guest characters, which is perfect. It's exactly what I wanted to see since Capcom and SNK are buddy-buddy again. Plus, Cristiano Ronaldo is going to be in the game in some fashion. I have no idea to what capacity Ronaldo is going to be in the game, but if he's a playable fighter, this game is going to sell like goddamn hotcakes. It comes out in April. 2XKO is my second most anticipated game of the year. This is the League of Legends 2v2 fighter that will probably take over the fighting game world the moment it drops. I also got to play this at EVO a bunch, and I got to meet and chat with the creative director of the game, Sean Rivera, alongside Tom and Tony Cannon, and it was really interesting to see how they viewed their own game. Usually every other fighting game has a set idea of what it wants to be, and they make improvements over time within a set scope. Not 2XKO though. They had no problem admitting that the game right now is super fluid and they are building on top of it rapidly based on feedback and inspirations from other games, which makes sense considering that this was originally revealed to be a 1v1 fighter and has transformed numerous times throughout development. This is going to be a very, very iterative fighting game. It's completely free to play. They're going to make all their money back through skins and they're going to add characters for free, so I anticipate that this will be a game with a very long life. The biggest draw of the game to me though is the 2v2 aspect, where 4 people can play at once. Very similar to Multiverse's initial pitch, but it feels more cooperative in this game with how the tag mechanics work. It's gonna be something special for sure. I don't think it's gonna be coming out before EVO this year, but we'll see. One look at Constance and you can immediately spot its influences, but I'm not complaining. I love me some Metroidvanias, actually a lot of them, and I will gladly take more. I love how vibrant it looks, the animation is so goddamn fluid and clean, and the paint and ink focus looks pretty neat. It's supposed to be out late this year, and I imagine this will be one of the indie darlings of the year. Arc Raiders originally appeared to be a massive dynamic co-op shooter with a ton of Star Wars Battlefront energy, and a lot of people were really into this. This was in 2021 though, and we didn't see a lick of it until recently, where it has seemingly completely transformed into an extraction shooter. Rather than being bombastic and frantic as the reveal indicated, it's now more methodical, more tactical, more tense. It's also no longer free to play as initially promised, so the shakeup has been quite dramatic to say the least. Extraction shooters are second to hero shooters, with being the black sheep of gaming at the moment, so the reactions to the recent gameplay previews were a bit mixed. Personally, I'm eager to see what it adds to the extraction shooter genre. It's being developed by Embark, who created the Finals, which is an amazing game, so I have faith that they'll be able to deliver a solid title with Arc Raiders, although a premium price tag for a game like this, I don't know, man. There have been a ton of Souls-inspired action titles coming out of the East recently, with stuff like Stellar Blade, Black Myth Wukong, and Liza P being standouts, and there's a whole lot more on the way. One of them being Wuchang Fallen Feathers, which is set in the last years of the Ming Dynasty. I couldn't quite discern what the game is bringing to the table in terms of new gameplay ideas from the initial trailer, but I do think it looks fun. I'm hoping the mechanics are deep and the action is robust, but we'll know more soon enough. I'm not someone who is very into life sim games, but Nivalis is too enticing of a title to not try out. The voxel cyberpunk setting of the game looks amazing. I love how vertical and dense it looks. Just from the trailers, it feels so alive and inviting that I would love just to walk around in that world and see all of its landmarks and citizens. I wouldn't even touch the life sim stuff, okay? I would legit just be walking around the entire time. Maybe this will be the gateway into the life sim genre that I've been waiting for. Hard to believe it's been over 8 years since Killing Floor 2, a game I enjoyed very much. So naturally, Killing Floor 3 has me a little bit excited. From what I've seen of it so far, it looks cool. I don't doubt that it will be a fun game, but there are some things about it that aren't gelling with me yet. I don't think the guns look nearly as punchy or as deadly in motion as previous games, which I value a lot when it comes to shooters. I'm also curious to see how the new specialist system is going to work. In previous games, you could play a single class in a multitude of ways with how customizable they were. KF3's new system seems like it is going to be more restrictive in how each class can be played, which is probably there to amplify microtransactions for cosmetics and subclasses. I hope that's not the case, but I guess we'll see. I am interested, don't get me wrong, I'm just a little bit weary. Indie skating games are one of my favorite things in this world. Stuff like the Ollie Ollie series, Rollerdrome, Skatebird, and stuff that's still in early access like Hellskate and Driftwood are fucking dope. And Skate Story looks to be the most unique one ever made with its concept, its visuals, its presentation, and just everything else about it. The camera angle being so low and high angled is going to produce a lot of photogenic moments and makes the game look so naturally cinematic. I cannot wait for this one. I have been waiting a mighty long time for it. Sucker Punch simply does not miss. I'm certainly not biased or anything, no sirree, not me. Jokes aside, everyone knew their next game was going to be a Ghost sequel, and why wouldn't it be? Ghost of Tsushima made too much money for there not to be a sequel. I still boot up that game just to frolic around and gaze at the beauty of the world. Ghost of Yotei will probably look even better, so that's an exciting prospect by itself. It's set in a new time period with a completely new cast of characters and a stunning new locale. Not much was revealed in terms of combat and overall gameplay, but Tsushima already had an amazing core for its combat, so it will be awesome to see all the new additions and changes. I am very, very excited for this. This and Death Stranding 2 in the same year. I am eating good. I haven't played an Assassin's Creed game since Syndicate, so I completely missed Odyssey, Origins, Valhalla, and Mirage. After loving the series when it first started, I just lost interest in it after a while. I didn't think anything Assassin's Creed related would ever pull me back in. That was until AC Shadows was officially revealed, and I was decently impressed. The time period is definitely a factor, but the actual game itself looked pretty good outside of the usual Ubisoft jank. After Star Wars Outlaws, Ubisoft delayed Shadows for more polish and completely changed the bullshit season pass model they initially had in place. And based on the small snippets of gameplay that have dropped after the initial delay, it seems to have done wonders for it. It drops in February, but I'll probably grab it on sale regardless of the reception it gets. Certain pockets of the internet have been demanding a pirate game not named Skull and Bones for eons, and RGG has heard their prayers. This is probably the most out-of-the-box Like a Dragon game they have conceived thus far, and as a super fan of the series, that's saying a lot. A modern-day pirate adventure with an amnesia-ridden Majima is not something I ever expected, but I am happy my boy is finally getting his own game after so long. This takes place 6 months after Infinite Wealth, a game I haven't played yet, so I have some homework to do before I can get to pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. But from everything they've shown so far, I will probably love it. I really like the Little Nightmare games, and I thoroughly enjoyed 2, although it was weird that game wasn't co-op since you played as Mono and 6. Little Nightmares 3 has 2 characters as well, and it's confirmed to have co-op, which is great. It'll be interesting to see how the co-op feature changes up the series' level and mission design, especially since the new characters are wielding weapons now. It'll be cool to experience the new setting and all the new horrors that await within it, preferably with a friend, and preferably around Halloween, for spooky season. There's nothing quite like collections of old iconic fighting games to make grown adults freak out, am I right? What? Capcom vs. SNK is a huge pillar of fighting games. CVS2 is one of my favorite fighting games ever, so much so that my channel banner is a shitty attempt at trying to replicate that game's iconic presentation. So while those games are the core appeal of the package, the stuff I'm most excited for are Project Justice, Power Stone 1 and 2, and Plasma Sword. They are no longer stuck on decades-old hardware, and they come equipped with decked-out training modes and rollback netcode, which is a huge W. It's a dream come true. Now all I need is just a collection of the Street Fighter EX series, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, and Tech Romancer, and we're golden. Heart Electric is an interesting amalgamation of a lot of what makes the free-to-play Titans the monsters that they are. It's a 4-team hero extraction battle royale where each hero's weaponry is customizable, and there's a huge emphasis on mobility and using the environment to your advantage. The mechanics of the game are super interesting with how lives are a collective resource that your team has to replenish before you run out and lose the ability to spawn altogether. Plus, the magnet abilities and other hazards make it seem like a pretty dynamic game in the making. It's a small studio shooting for the stars. I'm keen to try it out, and I hope the game finds its audience. After years of people using multiplayer mods for Souls games so they didn't have to jump through hoops just to actually play with people, Bandai Namco and FromSoft finally looked at these mods and said,
"Yeah, we can definitely make a game out of this, no problem."
Nightreign is a multiplayer-focused spin-off of Elden Ring that has the Nameless King from Dark Souls 3 in it for some reason, which makes me think they're going to have bosses from all of their previous games in here. What better way to reuse assets than to repurpose them for a boss rush raid game in the Elden Ring universe that you can play either solo or with friends? 2 of them specifically, because for some reason you can only play in 1s or 3s. Duos aren't allowed. An interesting decision to say the least, but aside from that, it's going to be a class-based roguelike, so it will be fascinating to see how all the gameplay will be tailored to fit the ideas on display. Me and the boys are pretty excited about this one, and I imagine it will sell insanely well. When it was shown off, Ballad of Antara looked like an interesting Souls-like with its setting and the fact that it's a multiplayer title with different classes and whatnot, something I think we'll be seeing more of in this space when Nightreign completely breaks the door open. What I didn't know is that Ballad of Antara is going to be a free-to-play game. I'm not really sure how that model is going to work for a game like this. I know free-to-play is the best way to garner a player base, and I enjoy quite a few free-to-play games, but they do come with a lot of bullshit, and I just want to know what the threshold of bullshit will be here. The core game itself, though, looks pretty appealing, and I'm curious to see what the systems and mechanics are like, and just what type of content the game will consist of. Clair Obscure Expedition 33 was an absolute darling at Summer Games Fest earlier last year. I assume it's because everyone collectively said, "Finally, a French JRPG." But for real, this looks awesome. The presentation is immaculate, the combat has a lot of style and pizzazz to it thanks to the UI, and the voice cast for this game is pretty stacked. I'm talking Charlie Cox, Jennifer English, Andy Serkis, Ben Starr, and more. Sandful Interactive are a relatively small team that's putting out something as bold as this, so I hope it makes a big splash. After a long hiatus, Double Dragon got a charming pixel art beat 'em up in 2023, and it's getting another one in 3D this year called Double Dragon Revive. I will just come out and say it, I am not big on the game's look. I think it could benefit from more stylization when it comes to lighting and shaders and especially more color, but I am digging what I'm seeing when it comes to the gameplay. The hits look beefy, the levels seem pretty diverse, and the soundtrack sounds awesome. This comes out in October, which is usually when the big AAA games stack on top of each other, so this is probably going to have to be a game I get on sale. South of Midnight intrigues me for sure. I really dig the art style and the stop motion. The mystical rendition of the dirty Deep South is a super dope setting, and it's being composed by one of my favorites, Olivier de Riviere, who did Dying Light 2, Streets of Rage 4, and Plague Tale. It's an action-adventure game that gives me a ton of Kena Bridge of Spirit vibes with how artistically driven everything is. The combat, the puzzles, and the platforming also looks kind of Kena-ish in a way. I think the gameplay trailers have made the game look cool. Nothing blew me away per se, but I think it will be a very nice experience to play through. Eternal Strands is one of the coolest looking action games of the year, and it takes huge inspiration from Breath of the Wild. Almost everything in the world is interactable, creating a behemoth of a physics sandbox where you can use the world as a weapon in whatever ways you could potentially think of. It has some RPG and crafting elements, but at its core it's an action game where you can create your own solutions against whatever stands in your way. There have been a handful amount of games that have used Breath of the Wild as a template and even as their foundation, but Eternal Strands looks like it's going for a more focused interpretation of its influence. It looks super dope and it comes out really soon. While Fatal Fury and 2XKO are going to be the headliners for fighting games this year, don't forget there's also a 3v3 Hunter x Hunter fighter coming out soon. It's not getting a whole lot of buzz because it's not exactly a looker, especially since people expect anime fighters to look more like Dragon Ball FighterZ and Guilty Gear, and this definitely doesn't. But looks aside, the gameplay for this game is exciting and degenerate as fuck, which is not surprising considering it's being made by Aiding. The same studio who made Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, and DNF Duel, which are some of the most degenerate and deliciously busted fighting games you will ever play. Then Impact's mechanics and systems appear to be an amalgamation of stuff from their previous games, so the sky is the limit for how crazy the game will be. I don't think this is going to be a very big hit or anything like that, but hey, I will always take more aiding games. Didn't Mickey Mouse just enter public domain last year and we already have this on the way? God damn, you guys work fast. Jokes aside, Mouse PI for Hire's animation single-handedly put it on the map, and for good reason, because it is excellent. It captures the 1930s era of cartoons to an absolute T. Everything from the character design to the weapon animations is gorgeous as hell to look at. Looks alone will probably sell a lot of people on this game. But let's not forget, it's also a shooter, and I think the gameplay looks fine. It's not doing that much for me in terms of mechanics or anything like that, but the overall package looks so charming that it probably won't bother me much. If Silksong wasn't a thing, I can kind of confidently say that Replaced would be the long-awaited indie gem that people would be begging to come out already. Its reveal in 2021 made a great first impression with its amazing art style, interesting narrative direction, and being unapologetically inspired by the likes of Blade Runner and the Arkham games. It was slated to come out in 2022 at the time, but it's been delayed quite a bit, as you can see. But it's ready when it's ready. I'm in the game's Discord server, and it's been interesting to see how development for the game has been progressing. With how they've been talking about the game recently, it does seem like 2025 will be the year it drops. This game was initially revealed as Ghost Bike in 2023. It was slated to come out in 2024, but a year after it got revealed, a new trailer for it came out, and it was born again as Wheel World. In the dev blog on their Steam page, the studio stated that Ghost Bike was going to be a morbid, streamlined adventure about dying as a cyclist who is enjoying cycling heaven. But it transformed into a celebration of cycling that, in their own words, would be more fun to play. I thought I'd share that information because I find changes in direction and stuff like that in video games so fascinating. I love the cel-shaded art style and the verdant scenery. It looks like it will be a super relaxing game to boot up, move around, and soak the scenery in. And if you don't know already, I love games like those. I'm really looking forward to this one. 33 Immortals is a pretty ambitious action roguelike on the way, mostly because 33 players can join in on raids together, get cool loot, and level up enough to presumably kill God or something. I have been really into co-op roguelikes recently since I played TMNT Splintered Fate and Raven's Watch, so this is right up my alley. From the beta and the playtest the game had, it got a lot of positive buzz and feedback, and it's supposed to be launching into early access this year. Although it's not going to be on Steam, which is an interesting decision. Now, I don't mind using the Epic Game Store, I couldn't care less, honestly. But for a game like this, I imagine you would want more platforms to better sustain the game. Shout out to Rumbleverse, gone too soon. I guess we'll see how the game performs, but it does look pretty dope. This was revealed at Summer Games Fest last year, and I was blown away at what I saw. Finally, Scottish Dynasty Warriors. But for real, Tears of Metal looks insane. It's an interesting mash of barrack management, roguelike, and Muso. The scope and scale of the open-aired hack-and-slash combat seems so riveting. It's also bloody as hell, and the Scottish metal soundtrack is so good. I get a lot of Brutal Legends vibes from this for some reason, mostly because of the presentation, and that is a game I really wish got a sequel. Tears of Metal is the closest thing I think I will ever get to that, and that is more than satisfactory for me. Dead Static Drive is a game that is coined as Grand Theft Cthulhu, and if you don't believe me, it is literally on their Steam page. And it makes complete sense once you look at some gameplay. The sun-bleached color palette looks pretty good, and the vibes are very eldritchy, if that's even a word. And supposedly there is a lot of depth when it comes to making choices, as other people you meet in the world are fighting for their own survival as well. So I imagine there will be a lot of dynamic elements as to how you're going to engage with this scary-ass world with scary-ass things in it. It's been in development for a long time, and it's finally slated to come out soon. I adore Fable 1 and 2, they are some of my favorite original Xbox games ever. And since Fable 3, it's been a rough road for the series. The two spin-offs didn't do very well, the Fable co-op game got cancelled, and Lionhead Studios ended up getting closed down. Now we're getting a revival of the series, and it's being developed by Playground Games, who have only made Forza games prior to doing this, so it's quite a radical shift in direction for them, which is really cool to see. Normally, I would be a lot more excited for Fable's return, I really would, but to be frank, they haven't shown much, if anything, when it comes to actual gameplay. It's all been cinematics and in-game graphics, which look great, don't get me wrong, but I want to see what makes this Fable Fable, or what makes this Fable different from the rest. I want to be on board, but I just need to see more. I played the Fragpunk beta in the summer and I really enjoyed it. It's a hero shooter that leans towards the likes of Valorant and CSGO, but the big draw is the cards, which dramatically affect how matches are played. There are so many practical and wacky modifiers that you and your team can vote to use after each round, or you can skip picking cards in between rounds entirely to save up enough points for better cards in later rounds. On top of the hero shooter matchups, the cards being the humongous X factor that they are allow for a super dynamic game where there's so much strategic flexibility with how you compose your team and arrange your cards. It's free to play and it's scheduled to launch in March. I'm curious to see how it will be received. Hyper Light Breaker is the newest game from Heart Machine, who have gems like Hyper Light Drifter and Solar Ash. I loved Solar Ash in particular, and it seems like everything I enjoyed about it is carrying over to Hyper Light Breaker. It's an open world co-op roguelike that looks really Risk of Rainy, to put it bluntly, but I for one am super down for it. There's a pretty healthy mix of guns and melee, and I want to see how builds and perks work in a setting like this. I am keen to see how exploration is going to be handled, since levels themselves are going to be procedurally generated. The feeling of tangible exploration is a huge reason why people love Heart Machine's games, but we don't have to wait long to find out. It launches into early access really soon. Hyper Light Breaker isn't the only game Heart Machine has lined up for this year. They have another game in the works called Possessors that is being published by Devolver Digital. It's a Heart Machine game, so you know the visuals are going to pop. But gameplay-wise, it's a fast-paced side-scroller with combat that's influenced by platform fighters. There's not much else information about Possessors beyond the minute-long reveal trailer. On a side note though, Heart Machine's output is commendable. I deeply appreciate that each one of their games is something completely new. It's supposed to release this year, but Devolver-published games have a history of being delayed, which is not a bad thing. I wouldn't be surprised if this got pushed back. I could try to describe and sell you on Mecha BREAK, but I assume that if you're watching this video that you are able to see. Does this not look sick as fuck? I mean, Jesus dude, it looks amazing. I wish I'd been able to play the beta for this game, because with every single second of it that oozes into my eyes, it just makes me more excited to play it. It's going to launch with 3 modes, and those modes being 3v3 deathmatch, 6v6 hero shooter, and a PvPvE extraction mode, which is a pretty robust offering for a free-to-play game. I just hope it has no pay-to-win bullshit, since it would be so easy for a game like this to give into that. Fears aside, it looks awesome, and I am patiently waiting for that launch date. Another game I wish I had played the beta for is SplitGate 2. The first game was a beautiful mash of classic Halo and Portal that was just so fulfilling to play, and I think part of that was because of the nostalgia factor. Playing the original reminded me of the Halo 3 LAN parties me and my brother used to throw, and it was a nice reminder of how simple stuff could be back then. With Splitgate 2, it has a more competitive focus with classes and synergies. To me, it seems like they're trying to evolve Splitgate rather than change it, if that makes sense. I've watched a lot of beta gameplay for it, and it still looks like Splitgate despite all the additions, which is a huge plus for me. I'm pretty excited for this. In 2023, I played a lovely climbing game called Judas. It was a game where you climbed up huge walls and mountains to return an organism to its rightful place. The presentation of that game was vivid, jubilant, and above all else, hopeful. Climbing in that game was nothing short of fun and cathartic. Cairn is an upcoming climbing game that looks to be the polar opposite, where climbing is a grueling ordeal that the main character has to do for the sake of survival. It's so gritty and unforgiving. 99% of the main character's voice lines in the trailers are just her screaming out of fear, frustration, and anger. Playing this just looks like a nerve-wracking experience, and I am here for it. I think it has potential to be one of the biggest gems of the year. There's a lot of AAA Marvel games coming down the pipeline, and the first one scheduled as of right now is Marvel 1943 Rise of Hydra. I love the premise and the setting for the game, taking place in World War II, where the US and Wakanda are fighting for their own interests against the Nazis, with Captain America and Black Panther headlining the game. It's being made by Skydance New Media with Amy Hennig in the writer's room for the game, who has written for Uncharted and Soul Reaver, so I'm really stoked to experience the story. The cinematics are out of this world, like it's insane. Look at Kari Payton and Megalyn Echikunwoke's faces and the way they move. Oh my goodness. However, similar to how I feel about Fable, I need to see actual gameplay. There's 4 playable characters with Cap, Black Panther, Gabriel, and Nanali, so I want to get a taste for what that will look like in real time. Will each character have their own robust skill set, or will it be a linear game with limited roles and capabilities for each character? I just want a crumb. Just a little one. Regardless, it's a very interesting title that has my attention. Sword of the Sea is Giant Squid's next game. This is the studio behind Journey, Abzu, and The Pathless, 3 very exploration and movement focused games that I absolutely love. and from the very small amount we've seen of Sword of the Sea, it looks pretty special. It's like all of their past 3 games have been merged into a completely new idea. The imagery and scenery alone is absolutely jaw-dropping, and watching this dude glide through the sands and half-pipes on his sword is so fucking cool. I'm really ecstatic about this one, despite how little of it has been shown off. It reminds me so much of one of my favorite movies ever, Treasure Planet, with how it looks, and I've wanted a proper Treasure Planet / Treasure Planet adjacent game for a while now, and it's quite nice that there are 2 of them slated to come out this year. The other one is called Star Overdrive, and it appears to be much more gamey than Sword of the Sea from what we've seen. While it doesn't have the artistic prowess of Sword of the Sea, it does have a ton of flavor of its own. There's so much action and freedom of movement, there's a lot of SSX energy to this. While the combat doesn't dazzle me, everything else this has to offer looks so fun. It just looks fun. It comes out in April. It was only a matter of time before the Dungeon and Fighter series started to branch out into other genres due to how insanely popular it is overseas. They started with DNF Duel, which is a pretty cool fighting game if you ask me, and now we have a Souls-like that is heavily inspired and focused by a prominent character in that universe known as Kazan. I wasn't too impressed with the game when they first started to market it, just didn't seem like something I'd be that interested in despite my love for Souls games and Souls-likes, but recent trailers and gameplay peeks have looked better and better. The moment-to-moment combat looks so meaty and heavy, and the world and visuals look sick. Kazan being a berserker should lead to a lot of exciting set pieces and boss fights, plus grabbing Ben Starr for the lead role is a big W as well. It comes out in March. It might be a day one buy for me. Bionic Bay is a crazy-ass looking game. It's a visual stunner with some gorgeous lighting and pixel art environments. The game's swap mechanic opens the door up for a ton of crazy-ass puzzles and set pieces. You can spot the Inside and Limbo influences, but it's definitely doing its own thing. I've been following this game for a while now, and I am glad to see that it finally comes out in March. What was supposed to be Dying Light 2's second expansion has turned into a full-fledged game with Kyle Crane making his return. Hearing Roger Craig Smith in a Dying Light game again is so nice, you have no idea. I assume this is taking place after the bad ending in Dying Light the Following, since Crane has zombie powers. Techland did a great job with updating Dying Light 2 by overhauling a bunch of its core systems like parkour and gore, so it's kind of in character for them for Dying Light the Beast to be its own game after it was planned to be a DLC. It's also in character for Techland to delay their stuff for a substantial amount of time. This is not a bad thing, by the way, to reiterate. I only say that because it's slated to come out in the summer. Hopefully it meets that window, but if it doesn't, no worries. I haven't played Journey to the Savage Planet yet. It's one of those games I meant to play, but kind of forgot it existed after so many other things came out, so I can't say much about its sequel other than it looks like it would be a good time. All the platforming stuff, all the alien fauna, all the potential co-op shenanigans. Just on a surface level, it's like High on Life and Ratchet & Clank had a baby, which is something I'm kind of into. It comes out in May. This is by far one of the coolest looking platformers / collectathons that I have seen in quite some time. The paper stamp art style is adorable, the animation is amazing. It has a lot of Banjo and 3D Mario vibes for me with how wonderful it seems. Funny enough, it's another game with a robust swap mechanic that is sure to put people's imaginations to the test. You can swap trees with stone and waterfalls with greenery. Imagine what else could be possible. The creativity and wonder on display from the dev team is just off the charts, and I am so ready for this to make a big splash when it comes out. More Doom. Oh hell yeah. Oh hell yeah. The Dark Ages is a prequel where Doomslayer is now a Viking fitted out with a razor-edged shield and a trusty flail. The shield is an offensive and defensive tool, and the more ancient weaponry looks brutal as hell. I am really fascinated to see what direction the Dark Ages takes in terms of gameplay. Doom Eternal is an incredibly demanding game as opposed to Doom 2016, where you could kind of play the game at your own pace most times, and it created an interesting debate. Some people want the Dark Ages to be more of a chill game where you are only concerned with killing stuff like 2016, and others want it to be a game with friction at every turn like Eternal. I'm in the Eternal camp for what it's worth. I fucking love that game and how unapologetic it was in getting you to play it by its own rules. But for all we know, the Dark Ages could meet in the middle or just do its own thing. Regardless of all of that though, the game looks out of this world and I cannot wait for it. The original Moonlighter is a 2D dungeon crawler where you also maintained a shop where you could sell all the stuff you ended up getting in your dungeon raids. It was a pretty unique title that I enjoyed a good bit. I never thought it would get a sequel, but it did, and it made the big jump to 3D. And I gotta say, I think the art style and color palette transferred over beautifully. I didn't see much else in terms of big changes in the trailers, but Moonlighter has always been an under-the-radar game, so I hope 2 is able to catch some more eyes. Tomb Water is a self-described Western Souls-like, which is a setting I haven't seen a Souls-like take place in yet. I've seen mythological Souls-likes, dark fantasy Souls-likes, futuristic Souls-likes, and even crab Souls-likes, but not something in the Old West, which is really cool. It's merging the Old West with Eldritch horrors, and it seems neat. There's not too many details about this game, but I think it's something worth keeping an eye on. Mainframes is a very cute looking window and desktop platformer. I adore anytime a game utilizes computer windows as video game mechanics, and Mainframe seems like it's using them in very creative ways. It looks absolutely adorable, and it comes out on March 6th. I really enjoyed Mafia 1 and 2, and it's dope to see that there's a new Mafia game on the horizon that takes place in 1900 Sicily. However, I will say the same thing for this that I said about Marvel 1943 and Fable. The cinematics and presentation looks incredible, but I need to see more of it in motion. Still though, the prospect of a new game in the series is very exciting. I just hope it doesn't follow the footsteps of Mafia 3, and if you played that game, I think you know what I'm talking about. It's due out in the summer. The premise of Blueprints is that you inherit a mansion, and you are tasked to explore its 45 rooms in an effort to find the veiled 46th room somewhere in the house. Each day you get a set amount of steps, and you can choose what room you'd like to build in an effort to get more steps back, or to solve esoteric puzzles to trudge forward. The way you build these rooms together impact how you attempt to solve puzzles and really assess your choices with each run. The way it's all laid out, there are so many secrets to discover and piece together in irregular fashions. From what I've seen and heard of the game, it's like playing through a mystery novel, which to me sounds like an interesting venture. Blueprints is shaping up to be an incredibly cerebral puzzle game, and it's due out in the spring. Atomfall is a survival action game set in a post-apocalyptic Britain. My initial impression of the world that they presented in the trailers was that it looked like Fallout 4 met Dying Light 2. The giant automatons, the blooming bioluminescence in the underground, and the feral enemies, it's hard for me to think of anything else when I look at footage like this. The initial reveal didn't show too much of how the game would actually play, and I really wanted to see how it would. I was granted my wish when IGN posted this 14-minute gameplay snippet, and to be blunt, I cannot believe this was allowed to be posted. The AI was beyond brain dead, and the overall feel and look of the combat was so flaccid. It's still in development, so I am sure these issues will be addressed, but I don't think it was a good idea to have this be the official look at gameplay. I am curious to see how this turns out though. It launches in March. Eric's Home, The Stolen Dream, stole the show at Future Games Fest last year thanks to its out-of-this-world presentation, the setting, and the narrative setup. Amazing visuals aside, it's an isometric stealth game. They released an extended gameplay trailer a couple of weeks ago that showed how players have to observe AI behaviors, look for numerous alternate routes, and use every tool on your person and in the environment possible. It's been a while since I've played a narrative-driven stealth game, and I imagine this will be pretty good. The Altars has one of the most interesting premises for a game this year. It's a game where you are the sole survivor stranded on a foreign planet with limited skills and time, and in order to survive, you need to make use of the planet's special substance and the quantum computer aboard your ship to make alternate versions of yourself to do various tasks around the ship. These alternate versions aren't biological clones, however. Each version has had their history altered in some way, like not dropping out of school or saving a failed marriage, so that they end up being more proficient in fields that the original isn't. But this comes with the caveat that each alternate has their own goals, fears, feelings, and wants, which could potentially lead to conflicts and betrayal. So managing all of that while trying to get off the planet seems super intense. I can't even imagine the amount of dialogue that one voice actor had to do for the many different versions he had to play of one character. It's an incredibly unique game on paper, and I am excited to experience what it has to offer. If you are fiending for a Hotline Miami fix, knowing that we may never get another one again, I'd like to tell you about Sonokuni. It's a nutty-looking neon-soaked top-down action game that's clearly inspired by Hotline Miami, while throwing in Japanese mythology in there as well. The biggest draw for this, I imagine, will be the soundtrack, which is made up of super glitchy, drugged-out, and amped-up Japanese hip-hop. If you click on any of the trailers, the comment section will mostly be made up of people adoring the OST. I think it looks cool, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the rest of the game's music in particular. There's been a huge boom in ARPGs recently with Diablo 4, Last Epoch, and most recently Path of Exile 2. With the genre experiencing a huge influx of interest and popularity, I think that could greatly benefit Hellclock. It's an ARPG set in a dark fantasy twist on the War of Canudos. It's being made by a Brazilian studio by the name of Rogue Snail, and it's great to see more regions of the world being able to produce and distribute video games. I hope to play this during the next Steam Next Fest to really get a feel for it, because I'm really digging a lot of what the game is doing. The art style, the aesthetic, the comic book atmosphere, the combat, it all looks pleasing as hell. It's slated to come out in the summer. After the success of Turbo Overkill, one of the most beloved shooters in recent memory, I didn't expect Trigger Happy's next game to be a survival horror. This is a big change of pace for the studio, and for what it's worth, it looks sick as hell. There's not much to go off in terms of gameplay, but I adore how it looks. The film filter, the muted and desolate color palette, and some of the environments looking the way they do, I want to see what else they have in store for this. What happens when you mix 3D stealth games with deck building? You get Sleight of Hand. The developer is a huge fan of Metal Gear Solid, and they even say that this is like Metal Gear Solid, where all of Snake's tools have been replaced with mystical cards, which heightens strategy and problem solving to new levels as demonstrated in the official gameplay trailer. This is an interesting meeting of genres, to say the least. It's trying something fresh in the stealth space, which has kind of stagnated recently in terms of new ideas, so I hope it makes a big splash to open a door a bit more. Demon Tides is an open world platformer where player expression is the #1 priority. It's a game that's wearing all of its influences so lovingly on its sleeve. It's nice that we're getting more platformers of this ilk where games are giving players the tools to solve various traversal problems in their own ways. The last one I recall playing was Pseudo Regalia, and that game is absolutely incredible. I highly recommend it if you haven't played it already. The anime-inspired 3D cel-shaded art style is nice, and it sounds like they were able to snag 2 Mellow to make some songs for the game, which is a huge plus. Overall, this one looks like a blast. Ultimate Sheep Raccoon is the long-awaited follow-up to Ultimate Chicken Horse, which was a party platformer where you and your friends built the level in real time in attempts to try and screw each other over. You know, like real friends. With Ultimate Sheep Raccoon, the same philosophy returns, with the twist being that everyone is really into BMX now. Being on bikes now is probably going to make this game a lot more painful, yet a lot more hilarious. I can't wait to end some friendships when this comes out this year. This is Far Away, not to be confused with the board game of the same name or the free Steam game of the same name. You might need a subtitle for some extra distinction, but that's just me. It's a gorgeous looking audio-visual experience about a dying star trying to keep itself alive by getting energy from other stars, and in the process of doing so, it creates constellations to leave its mark before it eventually fades. This is just the kind of abstract, optimistic existentialism that I have been looking for. It has been in the works for a while now, and I'm glad to see that it is nearing release sometime this year. Kingmakers is another indie game that caught people's eyes with its insane concept. You play as time-traveling mercenaries of some sort that go back to a war-torn era of history in an effort to save the future. Not by swords, shields, and arrows, but by cars, guns, and precision drone strikes. From what it looks like, everything in the environment is destructible, so there's numerous ways to fight enemies in these large-scale real-time battles. The sandbox is yours to do whatever you please with it, and it seems like it's going to be insanely stupid dumb fun. It's launching into early access sometime soonish. Will Follow the Light is a narrative-driven first-person adventure that takes place in the unforgiving domain of the Northern Sea. With its Alan Wake-inspired visuals, watertight focus on realism, and the themes of love and loss fueling the narrative, it's priming itself to be quite an emotionally charged journey. I don't think it's going to be anything riveting on the gameplay front, but I do think it looks like a very enthralling experience. What was once a solo dev project was picked up and funded by Sony, and it's finally nearing release, assuming it doesn't get delayed. Lost Soul Aside has been in the works for well over 8 years now. I mean, this is what it looked like initially. The progress of the project is awesome to see. Despite the long dev time, it's a game that people are still very much excited about. I mean, look at it. It's like Final Fantasy 15 meets Devil May Cry. The action is so stylish, the visuals are gorgeous, and that soundtrack could be something special. Death Stranding 2 and Ghost of Yotei may be Sony's big headliners this year, but given the success of Stellar Blade, I think Lost Soul Aside could achieve the same level of success as that, if not more, especially since it's coming to PC. I am one of those people who have been waiting for this forever, and it's finally almost here. Showa American Story is a game set in the 1980s of an alternate universe where America was colonized by Japan before a countrywide disaster happened, resulting in an odd post-apocalyptic world where zombies and other biological creatures reign supreme. You play as a teenage girl who rises from the dead and goes across the country in a coast-to-coast adventure to get her revenge. The premise is pretty out there, and the combat is super duper bloody and over the top. It also really loves itself some B-movies, which is very visually apparent. I get a metric fuck ton of No More Heroes vibes from this, and that is a beautiful thing. It's one of my most anticipated games of the year. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 is supposed to be out sometime this quarter, and following this game's development has been nothing short of interesting. The original is a cult classic that didn't sell well enough at the time to warrant getting a sequel. The IP gets bought out a decade later by Paradox Interactive, who are notorious for map games. It got an official reveal in 2019, which looked amazing, and it was scheduled to release the next year. Then it got delayed and all hell broke loose. Hardsuit Labs, the studio originally making the game, had vital figures leave before the studio got dropped from the project entirely, prompting Paradox to restart development and finding a new team to do it for them. And every look at the game since the studio change has been met with a lot of skepticism, primarily from vampire diehards with concerns about the lack of RPG elements and about the fact that it looks more like Dishonored than it does a proper vampire game. I have no connection to the series at all, so my perspective is that the game looks enjoyable. Nothing about it wows me, but I'm willing to give it a shot. I am keen to see fan feedback when this officially releases, just out of curiosity to see what diehards of the series want a sequel to look like. It's slated for Q1 of this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if it needed more time in the oven. Keyborg, Kyborg, Kiborg is a roguelike beat-em-up where you get more cybernetic enhancements after each run until you become a literal killing machine. It's definitely not holding back when it comes to the blood and gore. The presentation isn't the best, but the gameplay looks cool. It also has an interesting third-person shooter element where the perspective actually changes when you aim. Might be more of a novelty than a quintessential gameplay element, but it's neat to see implemented. It's slated for Q2 of this year. The recent dark rebranding of Pac-Man with the secret level episode and this new game called Shadow Labyrinth is very fascinating. It's not the first time a Jubilant series goes to the dark side for a bit, but I wouldn't have expected Pac-Man to be one of those series. Anyways, Shadow Labyrinth is an action-adventure platformer where Pac-Man follows you around like Pod follows 2B as the swordman messes up anything that comes his way on the alien planet that they're on. And as the game progresses, you eventually unlock Pac-Man's hidden evil powers that turn him into an absolute monster. I'm intrigued by this, I won't lie. It's a very interesting direction to take the IP creatively. Devil May Cry and Bayonetta have been the figureheads for action games for a mighty long time now. But in my heart, Ryu Hayabusa is forever the king, and I've been very patient for something new for Ninja Gaiden. And although Ragebound is following the steps of the NES games as opposed to the Xbox games and Ryu isn't playable, I'm still super happy that we're getting something Ninja Gaiden related, and Ragebound looks sick. It reminds me of Strider, but much bloodier, obviously. It's no surprise that Dotemu is publishing this since they also released Metal Slug Tactics recently, which was another IP that hadn't had something in a while. I am hopeful that this game succeeds so we see more of the franchise in the future. No date yet, but I kind of have a hunch that it comes out in summer. I mentioned earlier that there was one title from Obsidian that I didn't include in their amazing track record, and for me, that game is Outer Worlds. I tried so hard to get into that game, but the formula just wasn't doing it for me, and I couldn't push past 2 hours in that game. I wanted to experience the world and the writing and its characters, but it was one of those rare games where the gameplay was repelling me at every turn. All that to say, I think Outer Worlds 2 looks like a massive improvement. The visuals and the art direction are much improved. That's to be expected, but the actual moment-to-moment gameplay looks way more engaging and has a lot more kick to it. One of my biggest issues with Outer Worlds 1 was how flaccid it felt to play. The combat in 2 looks way more fun in comparison. Pair that with Obsidian's brand of world building, quests, and writing chops, and this is a game I am definitely a lot more interested in than I expected to be when it was first revealed. Obsidian have 2 massive RPGs coming out in the same year, and I hope they both pay off. Midnight Murder Club is a new game from the studio that made Knockout, which was a really fun dodgeball-oriented game that unfortunately got shuttered. This is their new project that is being published by Sony, which is really surprising. The idea is that you are locked in a dark manor with 5 other people with only a flashlight and a gun. You compete against other people, either solo or with friends, to find more equipment in order to take them out. Sound and light are huge proponents of the game. It is pitch black and you need to use your light, but you also risk being seen or heard by others, so it's both incredibly tense and hilarious. It's like hide and seek, but if you get caught, you get shot. I think I would have a lot of fun playing this with my friends who are already into stuff like Hunt and Lethal Company. It's slated to release in early access next month. It's been over 3 years since It Takes Two came out, which ended up being one of the most beloved and cherished games of 2021. Hazelight's newest game, Split Fiction, is another co-op focused game where you play as 2 writers stuck in a simulation of the stories that they wrote. One person writes sci-fi and the other writes fiction, so levels will differ in setting and situations, which based off of the work of their past games will lead to a ton of variety when it comes to gimmicks and methods of cooperation. And they're still doing the Friends Pass thing where only one person needs a copy of the game to play it with their friends. Hazelight has just been getting better and better with each game, and I have no doubt that Split Fiction will be another hit for them. It comes out in March. Remember when we were younger and our visions for a perfect video game was just mixing and mashing all kinds of video games into one? That is what I feel like happened when Crimson Desert was first conceived. If you haven't seen footage of this game yet, please watch the 2023 and 2024 Game Awards trailers and you will know exactly what I'm talking about. One of the top comments for the 2024 trailer puts it perfectly. Ghost of Assassin's Creed Tears of the Witcher's Elden Ring. I would have added Dogma in there somewhere, but that's just me. Crimson Desert is insanely ambitious to the point where it's a game I have to have in my hands physically to believe that it's actually real. But skepticism aside, it does look incredible. The combat looks fun as hell, there's so many ways to explore the world, it's so fucking big, and it looks like there's a ton of stuff to discover by yourself. It finally got a release window of later this year. Dispatch was recently revealed at the Game Awards, and initially I thought it looked alright. The voice cast is pretty cool and the animation is fantastic, but I don't know, it didn't do anything for me at first. But then I rewatched it and it clicked for me. I adore superheroes, and I think the premise of literally dispatching superheroes to emergencies based on their powers, behaviors, and abilities is really cool. Although this looks very serialized, almost like a Telltale game, which makes sense considering that some of the talent from the old Telltale titles are working on this. So I'm interested to see if there are any actual mechanics in the game, or if it's just a game that treats itself like a point-and-click movie or TV episode. I'm cool with either one, I'm just curious. Regardless, it's something fresh in the superhero video game market, and I think I'll enjoy it a lot. My brother loves Xenoblade X, like loves it. And to put it in perspective, he is the biggest hating butt of a stitch bat raster that I know, so when he says he loves a game, that's when I know he's serious. I wanted to play Xenoblade X when it was on the Wii U, but I never got around to it. So it getting a remaster is perfect for me since all of the Xenoblade games are on Switch now. I can easily just play through the entire series now. When the Switch 2 comes out, of course. This comes out in March. Coming off of Sifu, which is a banger game, I don't think anyone expected Slow Clap's next title to be a football game. FIFU, as they call it. I saw a decent amount of disappointment from people expecting Slow Clap's next game to be combat oriented, which is fair, but me personally, I'm very fascinated by the direction they're taking. AAA sports games outside of College Football 25 have been in the shitter for quite a while now, so it's nice to see other studios taking their crack at sports games with their own flares. Now, it does look like Rocket League with people instead of cars. But given how mechanically dense Sifu and Absolver are, I think that level of complexity will be applied to rematches systems. It's not going to be free to play, and I'm not sure Slow Clap intends for this to be a long-running title for them. Premium multiplayer games are a much tougher sell than they used to be, so I wonder what the focus is going to be with Rematch. Despelote is an upcoming slice-of-life indie that takes place in 2001 Ecuador. It's a semi-autobiographical game that highlights the humanity and clarity that something as simple as a soccer ball can elicit. Its art style makes it look like a very unique game. And for authenticity, a lot of the visual and audio assets have been recorded on location in Ecuador. From the trailers, it oozes love for times past, and I'm sure it will be a very bittersweet experience once people dive into it. It's slated to come out early this year. This is a high-action cyberpunk Metroidvania that has a ton of action. The main character has a wide arsenal of weapons and abilities to choose from, ranging from guns to blades to dashes to shields. There's a lot they can do. There's so many options to choose from, and it will be really fun to find synergies within the weapon and skill trees, assuming the game has them. Not much else to say besides it looks sick as hell and that it drops very, very soon. Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii isn't the only pirate game coming out this year, although this may not be the kind of pirate game you're expecting it to be, and it is Mark of the Deep. It's an isometric action game with, and I quote, a thrilling mix of Metroidvania and Souls-like elements. It reminds me a bit of Death's Door and The Ruined King visually, but it's kind of hard to tell what's going on in the trailers since everything is so small. I wasn't able to get the firmest idea of what combat will be like. I imagine it will be a lot of dodging and striking, but I hope there is more to it than that. It was supposed to come out last year in October, but it got delayed to January of this year. It's supposed to be out pretty soon, but there's no exact date for it yet. Survival horror indies have been getting a lot of traction recently thanks to games like Signalis, Hollow Body, Crow Country, and the recently released Sorry We Are Closed. There are 3 more that I know of coming this year, one of them being Fragile Reflection. It's got somewhat advanced PS1 visuals that are absolutely drenched to the bone in psychedelics and VHS effects. There's a bunch of fog and spooky dooky monsters around, you know, nothing an adolescent can't handle. It's due out in February. The second survival horror indie that I know of this year is Heartworm. I've been following this game for a while now, and it has some similarities with Fragile Reflection, like its presentation and visual influences, but in comparison, Heartworm looks more measured. Well, mostly. There are big spooky dooky spiders and an alternate dimension after all. You know, nothing an adolescent can't handle. The core mechanic of the game is your trusty camera, which doubles as a weapon against static people, as well as presumably used to solve puzzles. It is slated for some time this year. And the third survival horror indie that I know of this year is The Mute House. And rather than being a PS1 retro-inspired title, this straight up looks like the Resident Evil 1 remake. Like, this is Spencer Mansion, okay? I don't care what anyone else tries to tell me. This is a strictly fixed camera view game, which is awesome. I thought these went extinct. I'm glad to see a new game have fixed camera perspectives because it adds so many layers to the tension and fear factor that people just dismiss as tanky and outdated. Outside of that, it is very clearly RE1 inspired, but I'm curious to see what the Mute House has to offer outside of its influences. It comes out in a few weeks. Mandragora is a side-scrolling action game that I was able to play during the most recent Steam Next Fest, and I had a great time with it. As you can probably tell already, it's very Metroidvania and Souls inspired, but it's doing a lot of cool things of its own. The art style is very pleasing to look at, finding that nice balance between muted and saturated colors. The presentation and UI are great, and the world itself is more alive and less cryptic than most other Souls games. Gameplay-wise, it's pretty cut and dry, but one look at the ginormous skill tree, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed with how much there is to unlock and customize. I do think they need to tweak the audio and visual feedback of combat to make things feel a bit more responsive. It's out in April, and I think with everything the game has going for it currently, it'll make its mark. Clockwork Ambrosia is a very interesting Metroidvania since it's more of a 2D shooter than anything else. The trailers don't show any close quarters combat, meaning you have to really rely on making weapons and other tools to aid you against enemies. It's a cool wrinkle on the typical formula for the genre where a lot of them prioritize melee combat. There is a demo out for it if you want to try it for yourself, and it's slated for Q2. If you are older than 25, I'm sure that you used to watch Stickman fight videos when you were younger. And I'm sure that you would agree at that time that they were the best choreographed fight sequences ever to exist. And while we have gotten some games that tried to replicate that aura those videos had, Stick It to the Stickman might be the closest thing we get to that. It's a multifaceted parody brawler where you beat the shit out of red stickmen in various formats and do a bunch of weird minigames in between to kill time. It looks goofy and wild as hell. It'll be really funny to see all the shenanigans the studio comes up with. It's due out sometime this year. A Sister's Journey initially got revealed in 2021, and the reveal trailer hooked me. Gorgeous pixel art, colorful as hell, and the core gameplay looked intense with the precision platformer and shooter elements. It looked to be a very challenging experience, and since then there has been no word on the game. It's slated to release this year as listed on their Steam page, but there hasn't been any promotional material or developer update about it in practically ever. The Twitter account has been really active lately though, so it might be a sure bet that it releases sooner rather than later. If you really want to play a literal walking simulator, look no further than Baby Steps, which is being made by the same creators who made Getting Over It. Putting one foot over the other alone looks like an arduous task, and then you throw in all the tumultuous terrain and obstacles like beams and rolling boulders and even skateboards. This is a content creator-ass game if I have ever seen one, if you know what I mean. QWOP and Getting Over It dominated leadership for a while when those games came out, and Baby Steps is primed to do the same. Soul Blade is a 2D action game with extraordinary hand-drawn animation that could definitely pass off as like a Disney XD show. The movement and flow of combat is so fluid and precise. Plus, it has parrying, and not just any kind of parrying, sick-ass parrying. The best kind of parrying. Between the two trailers for this game, it's under a minute of combined footage, but it leaves such a strong impression that I desperately want to see more of it. No exact date yet, but it is supposed to come out this year. I haven't played the first Chroma Gun. I'd seen it before, and the trailers for that game weren't really doing it for me. The reception to it was solid, but I ended up forgetting it was a thing. But I will say that Chroma Gun 2's trailer that dropped in the summer was pretty impressive. It's clearly inspired by Portal, but instead of shooting portals, you shoot colors. The puzzles they showed off in the trailer looked pretty simplistic, with it boiling down to just matching colors, but I imagine they will get headier as the game goes on. Story-wise, the narration and the score of the trailer make it sound bigger than life, with much more at stake than meets the eye. It looks really cool, to say the least. Into the Dead, Our Darkest Days is a side-scrolling zombie game that emphasizes survival over everything. The visual style and format reminds me a lot of Deadlight, but the gameplay seems like it's pulling a lot from other zombie games like State of Decay and Project Zomboid. Managing resources, recruiting survivors, crafting weapons, and minimizing injuries, all while trying to survive the unpredictable nature of the undead. Each survivor will have their efficiencies, and the dynamic nature of the game will present a lot of tough choices. What resources to prioritize, which areas to avoid, and what survivors to leave behind. State of Decay 3 probably isn't coming for a while, but this will do nicely. There have been many titles inspired by Blade Runner, and EXE Killer is no doubt one of them, but I think it's one of the more impressive ones that I've seen thus far. The retro futuristic western setting is so cool and the visuals look great. I would play this just to drive around in this car to soak in the atmosphere, and this is just pre-alpha footage. It's bound to look better. The premise is that you are a corporate bounty hunter named the EXE Killer who is slowly finding out more about himself and the work he's been doing for so long. It's a narrative-driven action-adventure shooter that's emphasizing choice above everything else. It promises dialogue and choices that matter. Progression isn't done through XP, but rather the equipment you choose to use, which is refreshing if you ask me. No menial stat boost, but rather understanding what you have at your disposal and how to use it. I think this game has a lot of potential. I can't wait to see the full thing. Mio Memories in Orbit is a Metroidvania centered around a robot who awakes on a massive technological arc that has been overrun with lush vegetation and rogue machines. I love the art style and visuals for this. It's very comic booky without being comic booky, if that makes sense. You know, the colors pop, the effects are beautiful, and the backgrounds are so massive and dynamic. Usually other Metroidvanias have condensed and static backgrounds, but the one in Mio feel like they're telling stories of their own. It looks incredible, to say the least. Out of all the Metroidvanias I've listed so far, and I've listed a lot of them, this is conceptually and visually the one that interests me the most. Spirit X Strike is a sick as hell looking 3D action fighter that looks like God Hand, Ninja Gaiden, and Fist of the North Star gelled into one. The speed of the combat is blistering fast and it looks so ferocious. I mean, this dude is flipping and dipping and 1-inch punching and Azuna dropping and doing a bunch of cool shit one after the other. I liken this to Undefeated, which is that indie Superman Dragon Ball inspired game where its ideas are doing the heavy lifting, and that is completely okay with me. The production value isn't very high, but the gameplay and ideas alone are doing more than enough for me to put this high on my wish list, and hopefully high on yours as well. It's been a hot minute since I've played a proper Dynasty Warriors game. I've played musos of other franchises like The Legend of Zelda Age of Calamity and Persona 5 Strikers, but I just haven't been into Dynasty Warriors itself like that for a long time. That is until Origins got revealed. I watched that trailer in full and I was like, yeah, okay, it's doing some stuff. I played the demo shortly after, and this game is fucking awesome. The scope of the battles is gargantuan. It's so satisfying to kill shit and do combos, and the feeling of war and struggle for power and territory is so much more palpable here than in any other Muso that I've played. On top of everything else, it just constantly looks cool as hell, no matter what you're doing. It comes out this month, and it will be the first Dynasty Warriors I have bought on day one. Last but not least, GTA 6. The last two Rockstar games have been fantastic experiences with great writing, excellent narratives, insane production value, and so much meticulous detail and love put into every pixel possible, and that is worth a lot in my book, don't get me wrong. But they've also been very boring games to play in my opinion. I didn't have much fun playing these games at all, and I don't imagine it's going to be any different with GTA 6 since they already have a winning formula. Will I still play GTA 6 to experience it? Absolutely. Visiting Vice City again is more than enough reason for me to play it, and all of the insane amount of detail and love that will have gone into creating the world and its characters will be something special to witness. I probably will end up loving the story and its characters, and the soundtrack will be as immaculate as always. I don't doubt any of that. I just hope that I actually have fun playing it. That's the sole thing that's holding me back from being really excited about this. I would love to be surprised and see Rockstar's gameplay evolve or do something new, but if it doesn't, that's fine. I know I'm well in the minority for this. It's by far the most anticipated game of the year by many others, although I don't think this will come out this year just based on Rockstar's history, but you know, we'll see. And that concludes all of the games that I'm interested in this year. Everything I mentioned was a brand new title, but there's also things for existing games coming out soon that I'm excited for, like the Lies of P DLC that's supposed to be out this quarter, Street Fighter 6 Season 2 with Mai coming out very soon, the remainder of MK1 Year 2 DLC, Season 2 of Tekken 8, the final episode for Kill the Justice League, and the new season of Marvel Rivals that has the fucking Fantastic Four in it, and they all look amazing. On top of that, there's also some games in early access that I hope are able to make it to 1.0 this year, like Hades 2, No Rest for the Wicked, Rogue Prince of Persia, Windblown, Supervive, Mortal Sin, and a bunch of other stuff. Like I said at the beginning, there's so much this year that I'm looking forward to, but that's enough out of me. I'd love to hear the games that you're excited for, whether they're on the list or not. I definitely missed some games, so please put them down below. Like and sub if you enjoyed the video, and thank you so much for watching.